All right. So now we through this podcast try to we hope to be the voice of NBA in India because it's picking up at a
Mm,
super fast pace, right? Like you could say it's similar to the EPL from say 2 years ago, 20 years ago. Now that is the pace at which NBA is picking up. You got all these young fans coming and supporting whichever team LeBron James plays for or whatever. But it's picking up at a rapid pace. And despite all the analytics that is involved in handling a team and running plays and all of that, when you watch a game, it's super friendly to the new fans. The commentators don't get very nerdy on these analysis. It's entertaining. They use a lot of pop culture jargon,
It's a
so it's
rap
very
battle vibe in pro
yeah.
sports. Is what it is. Yeah.
exactly. But if you're trying to get a new fan to watch cricket, for example, it's difficult. You got people talking about uh, economy and how
There's a
to
learning
utilize
curve.
the
Yeah.
power play and the ever-changing rules in the one-day game and all of that. Even I don't know how many players are inside the circle in the first 10 overs nowadays. So it's very
That's still
difficult for a
there.
new fan to grab onto that. What can say cricket learn from the NBA ecosystem as such, where you also don't get hit with a copyright infringement if I post a video highlight.
Yep.
Oh,
So
well, that's
is
the
there
biggest
something
one.
that sports can learn from NBA ecosystem?
Mhm.
Look, I think I hear that a lot. I remember cricket got obsessed with basketball a couple of years ago, especially
Mm-hmm.
because of Australia and New Zealand. Because I think the
Mm.
people involved were, probably grew up a bit like me, basketball fans, and
Right.
followed the NBA. And they were like, "Oh, we have to copy the NBA." And it's just like I remember there was some big meeting, and they got I can't remember if it was Adam Silver, but I think it might have been Adam Silver to
Oh,
come
wow.
over and talk and talk. And it was like a big sports conference type thing. And Adam Silver's like, "This is what you guys have to do to make cricket bigger." And Gideon
Mm-hmm.
Haigh was giving a speech there, this famous cricket writer and historian. And he was just like, and they all came off going, "Yeah, we have to do what the NBA does." And Gideon Haig's like, "You realize the NBA is a league and you guys don't have a league."
Correct.
And
Yep.
that's the basic problem with everything. If you watch the Big Bash, they are trying to follow the NBA. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
from the colors
Mm.
to
Yep.
the Brisbane Heat. The Brisbane Heat had the Bash Brothers. I mean, hello.
Yep.
Every
Yep.
year, the Brisbane Heat would give a new nickname directly stolen from somewhere in American
Right.
sports. Right? They had the
Bash
what do you call them?
Brothers.
The hat. Oh my god, I've forgotten the name. Like a skateboard style hat rather than a normal cricket style hat.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
They got the batting cage, although I think that's a brilliant
Yep.
idea and cricket should have
Right.
done it for years, but they got a batting cage. They couldn't be more going
Yep.
towards America, but they're a league and they could do that. That's not how international sport works.
Yep.
Right.
Also, then you've got the basic culture of cricket. You know, basketball started as a bunch of 6-foot white guys passing the ball to them, each other in sort of an unathletic version of rugby, right?
Yeah.
Without violence. And then it exploded through black people originally. The athleticism of black people and the intelligence of black people, the ball handling of all those different things that perhaps white players weren't doing beforehand.
Mm-hmm.
And then the Europeans came along and came up, almost brought the sort of Italian football vibes to it. And,
Yep.
and the way that they did it. And suddenly you have this mash of these two different cultures, this black American culture and this European strategic culture sort of coming together.
Yep.
Yeah, cricket has little bits of that. But we also then have Sri Lankan culture and South African culture and New Zealand culture. It's not that same thing where everyone gets in this big mesh of a thing and it creates this other style. There aren't, you would say that no one could copy the West Indies when they had their style. People tried to copy Australia when they had their style. But you have to have the teams to be able to do that. Whereas in the NBA, you're just like, okay, well, maybe there's a 7-foot shooting center from Europe we can bring in. And I remember when Sabonis came across, and I'm a big world basketball fan, and I already knew how good he was, and I was just like, well, this is the future. Clearly, if your center can shoot, this is absolutely the future. But you can just draft him in. International sport doesn't work that way. You have to groom them. And there's a reason also, there's a reason that we have, I don't want to get too nerdy into cricket here, but in cricket we have finger spinners. If you look at left arm finger spinners,
Yep.
We basically have two different breeds of left-arm finger spinners. We have Asian-style left-arm finger spinners who usually put a lot of revs on the ball. They're usually smaller guys. They're quite crafty. They flight the ball. They mix up their pace. And then you have the big, beefy Western finger spinners, Paul Harris and Ashley Giles and Michael Beer. And they're like, big, strong guys, and they just wang it down. They're not even, or they're almost not spinners at all. It's very hard to develop a Asian style left arm finger spinner if you don't have the pitches and the society to do that. So there are little things where international sport doesn't play in. And that was one of the things that Gideon Haig was trying to say. The other thing is that cricket doesn't have a rap culture. Cricket doesn't have a sneaker culture. Do you know what I mean? It is what it is. And I think I've always thought that what you should be doing in cricket is almost playing up the grunge nature of it, which is literally most other sports have this long flow. Cricket has nothing, potential death. Yeah. Nothing, potential home run. Nothing. It has this incredible drama and ability to get you. There aren't that many sports that you can actually die in that are also quite effeminate and aesthetically pleasing as cricket. So it's, and it's also got this incredible culture from, the West Indies play it this way and Sri Lanka play it this way and Australia play it this way. There are way easier ways to market it. I think what you're talking about is this, if you run a league, what you might be able to say is, we want you to commentate in this particular style, right? Which is basically what the NBA have been training ESPN and all the different, Fox and all the different broadcasters over the years. They've been saying, look, this is what we want, this style of broadcasting. Yep. They own everything. Yep. That's not how cricket works. And then you've got simple things like you've got a bunch of we don't train people correctly because the American media system is so much better than the cricket media system as a whole. And so you get these players come in who've never had any training and all they've ever done is press conferences and they're trying to commentate and they don't really understand how it is. I remember Jalen Rose, because I'm such a, Nuggets fan. I remember when he came through ESPN and I said to Cricinfo at that time, we need to pick a player and make him our Jalen Rose. Yeah. And at that stage, Dirk Nannes was one of the most interesting players in the world. Dirk Nannes had played with everyone. He played for the Australian team. He played for the Dutch team. He played in England. He played in the IPL. He had friends everywhere. And Dirk Nannes was a professional skier who, ran his own business, who didn't come to professional cricket till he was like 28. And when you chat to him, he's just a fun guy. He's a bit of a different guy than Jalen Rose, but he's got all the stories, right? Right. And they just didn't get it. And I was like, when did Jalen Rose get picked up by Grantland? Was that 2010, 11, 12, somewhere around there, right? Yeah. I went to Cricinfo, and this is part of ESPN, mind you, but I went to Cricinfo, in 2012, 2013, and said, guys, the next big thing in sports media is podcasts. Yeah. And they were just like, we tried podcasts. We're not really sure about them. Wow. We're going to keep our English podcast because the guys in the English office like that, but we're not going to do it. And I was just like, trust me now, please. You have to do this. You have to invest in it. We will be able to completely rule and they just didn't get it. Cricket it hasn't got that, whatever it is that it needs to have. Perfect example. You talked about analytics before. In 1930s, when England couldn't beat Bradman, do you know how they came up with the bodyline system to beat Bradman? No. They got as much film on him as possible. And they sat around in a film room and they watched it, right? 50 years later, if you said, let's watch a bunch of cricket to see if we can get this guy out, cricketers are like, how do we do that? That's what Americans do. We wouldn't do that. We know how to get cricketers out. I was watching Last Chance U while I worked with St. Lucia. So St. Lucia was my first job in working for a cricket team. And I was like, the kids in Last Chance U who are failed amateur athletes, 20-year-old kids with drug habits trying to get off them, guys who come from bumfuck nowhere so they didn't get a good college offer, all those sorts of things, are watching more footage and doing more preparation on each game than David Warner is, then Kyron Pollard. Well, actually, unfair to Kyron Pollard because he does his own. But and I'm not having to go at David Warner. He would do it if that was part of the system. David Warner would be all in. But there was no system. We didn't watch film. We didn't even have access to film. If you weren't watching it on the TV, you couldn't even watch your team play, let alone the opposition team play. It's just like, so everything that you're talking about comes from a bigger, broader problem within cricket to begin with. Yes, obviously, there are things we could do. But to be fair, if you watch a baseball game, even if you watch a basketball game and they're talking about a pick and roll and you've never played basketball before and they're going on and on about weak side coverage and all those sorts of things, I think that that's not that much different to how many fielders are outside in the power play and those sorts of things. I think that basketball has just found a way of getting those things across, that everyone sort of knows what they are. And I mean, I was watching a lot of the finals, and they had really basic things like they had Jamal Murray explaining the triple threat position every day.
I love that.
You know what I'm talking. And they did it with lots of players, didn't they? That wasn't, you know. If you go to a T20 game now, I don't know what the IPL do. The IPL didn't used to do this, although they should. If you go to a Big Bash game or a 100 game or a Blast game or any of those, on the scoreboard, they do all that sort of stuff. That's all taken from American sports doing that sort of stuff, because they realize that the problem with cricket is that it is such a culturally passed on artifact, right? That people aren't finding it. And you go back to that, you know, the thing you said before, you can't even put a clip of it online without getting it taken down. So unless your father, your mother, or your auntie, or your big brother, or your sister, or the girl next door tells you about the game, chances are you won't get into it. That has caused huge problems outside of Asia. Hasn't caused any problems in Asia yet, but as basketball and football get bigger and tennis gets bigger, that might cause problems. Outside of Asia, that is a huge problem. No one plays cricket in England unless someone in their family gets them involved in cricket. My local cricket club, there was like one family that came from a non-traditional cricket background, and that was because our family basically dragged down a bunch of Polish kids and said to these guys, this is fun. You're going to have fun. Come down. And because my son was friends with them, they came down and they did have fun. But otherwise, there's no, they coming from a Polish background, they didn't even really know, they wouldn't even know where to go. Can you just go to a cricket club? You know, little things like that. And it's all about accessibility. And this is the big problem with why we don't have more Black African players in South Africa. This is the big problem why you basically have to be posh or Asian to play cricket in England. It's right across the board, is that, you know, outside of Asia, we have this huge problem with getting new people involved. And because cricket isn't run by one organization and one group, and they don't understand it, and there's so many disparate parts of it. And okay, so you like cricket, but what kind of cricket do you like? Wait, there's more than one kind? You know, there's like one kind of basketball. Like for years, all you had to know is that the shot clock was 24 seconds or 30 seconds. And realistically, I'm not sure you even had to know that. And in one league in the world, you couldn't play zone defense. That was about all you needed to know. Realistically. And even then you didn't need to know it. And in cricket, you need to know that one game goes for 3 hours and one goes for 5 days. There is that, you know, an incredible amount of shibboleth to cricket, but that's also why cricket is one of those great sports that gets people obsessed. But it is football and basketball are fundamentally better sports for casual fans. I believe they may not have as much depth as a sport as cricket does. And cricket has an almost, you know, an unending amount of depth, you know, a ridiculous amount of depth that we haven't even scratched the surface on. But basketball and football, you know, I took my wife to a couple of basketball games in 2012 when the Olympics was on. She was like, I get this. This is good. You know, you take a first-time cricket fan to a cricket game and they're like, where am I looking? Why is everyone standing still? It just doesn't go in the same way. And I think that, you know, that is something that cricket is recognizing, but is still struggling to recognize. And it just comes back down to the fact that it's run by a million different people at one time. And it's, you know, go back to my Dikembe Mutumbo thing. David Stern goes, we want this to be the first ever global sport, right? Now, football kind of beat him to it just because football was already out there, but football didn't do it on purpose. I'm not sure football quite worked out what it was doing until it was already popular everywhere. Whereas basketball, it was done on purpose. David Stern was like, okay, they like basketball in Sydney and Melbourne. And Perth. Let's push it Australian wide. Let's set up. I met Muggsy Bogues when I was a kid because he came out to Australia to do a basketball camp. Do you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
They pushed that. Then they went, okay, it seems to be doing quite well in China. Let's push that. And they made all these decisions. So when Dikembe Mutombo and Hakeem Olajuwon are doing well, it's just like they're on NBA action every 5 minutes because they know there's a bunch of kids in Africa who are watching. Yep. Yao Ming they wanted him so desperately. They wanted a player from China so desperately. Do you remember even Linsanity? Look at the way the NBA pushed Linsanity, right?
Yep.
We don't do that. We have in cricket 2 incredible cricketers over the last couple of years. We had a guy called Ajunta Mendes who played for Sri Lanka, who basically invented a bunch of new deliveries and bowled in a way no one had ever done before.
Right.
And then we had a Bangladeshi called Mustafizur Rahman who bowled basically spin at 135 k's an hour, right? Until his elbow gave away because no human. He's putting more revs on the ball than a baseball pitcher, but trying to bowl. Incredible what he was doing. 2 years after Mustafizur was one of the most famous probably the most famous cricketer in Bangladesh at that time. The World Cup or the Champions Trophy was in England, and Jonathan Agnew was, the famous BBC broadcaster was saying, I don't know much about this Rahman chap. He must be a spinner with a record like this, right? When Ajunta Mendes was tearing up, whatever he took, 7 for -7 against India and destroyed the West Indies and all those things, outside of the blogs, you had to go a long way for anyone to talk about him. If those were NBA players, they would have had an industry around them. You would have been able to buy jumpers with their faces on them. You would have walked into a ground and had a face on it every time, even as an opposition player, he turned up. If Sri Lanka would have suddenly been touring all these major places because it would have paid more money. If the BBC don't know who Mustafizur is and Ajunta Mendes literally disappears without anyone almost noticing that he was around, that is the difference between having a league and having an industry that works together to push everything out, and the difference between, what happens in cricket. The difference between Hoodie Melo playing and incredibly cool things. Mark Wood was a test cricketer who says that when he's bored in the outfield, he rides an imaginary horse. If every cricket fan in the world doesn't know that, that is cricket's fault.
That's their J.R. Smith moment right there. They should have pushed that out.
You know what I mean? All those sorts of things in basketball, and it's not just basketball. NFL's even better. They're everywhere.
Yeah. That's what I was thinking all through when you were talking about Jalen Rose. The NFL is even more incredible at this. Just the number of ESPN analysts that were ex-players, and they're incredibly good. Like Orlovsky was one of the worst quarterbacks ever. Is actually a pretty good analyst. When you look at Shannon Sharp, it blows my mind. And I'm not a big NFL guy, so I found out that Shannon Sharp was a Hall of Fame tight end for the Denver Broncos and wherever else he played, because I knew him as this really fun alternative to Stephen A. Smith. That's pretty much how he came across us. And then
look at NFL Films, what they did, how far ahead of everything that they were.
True.
The marketing of baseball. Baseball, you cannot ever convince me that baseball is not a fundamentally far more boring sport than cricket.
It is.
And I don't hate baseball, but I've been to baseball games and I was like, no wonder you guys are all singing songs, because, oh my God, I saw the Detroit versus Oakland and it was a shutout. I think it was an Australian pitcher playing for Detroit, unhittable. And I was like, that's it. No one's going to hit the ball. Is that it? Is that what I have come to see? A bunch of men miss a ball, right? And yet, look at the culture around and the way that it has grown around. And cricket has a better and more vibrant and more international culture than that. And we don't even sell it. It's ridiculous. All those sorts of things I'm talking about. America is absolutely brilliant at the way it does all that sort of stuff. But a lot of it does come back to that basic thing of you've got one group. You got MLB looking after that, and they look after it brilliantly. Yeah. We just don't have that in cricket.
Yeah, I think before Monish tells us we're running out of time, I want to chip in with one last point on the NFL. So I've been following the NFL on and off for a while, and I was all over Europe and Mexico last year, so I kind of picked up a few more games. at the start of this season, I subscribed on YouTube to the NFL channel, right? And you're right about the kind of content they keep pushing, because any given point, like I can log into YouTube right now, I click on my notifications, like the first 9 to 10 will be some new content that the NFL channel has pushed out, and they are relentless. Of course, I'm going to consume it. So now I know what a pick six is. I don't even know the NFL properly, but I know what a pick six is. NBA, 2 weeks in, I knew what a dagger was. I knew what a rainbow was, a rainmaker, all of these things. So, yep, I get that. But Monish, over to you.
Yeah, I mean, it's brilliant how you kind of described how
Yep.
having one group control the entire league is so much more
But
beneficial.
isn't that
and you
what the
can sell it out.
BCCI does anyway? What are we talking?
But the BCCI is a perfect example of someone who doesn't do that. I mean, cricket could be far bigger in India, and it could be far more dynamic in India. And realistically, you know, there are ways around. If BCCI wanted to make international cricket worth more money, they could make it worth more money. I can't imagine the NBA in the 80s just being like, really what we want to do is just worry about the American market here, right? And the BCCI, so if I was the BCCI, I'd be like, how do I get every, Indian expat kid in America and Brazil and wherever else they are? I mean, we all know that there are Indians literally every part of this planet. And it's like, they've all got money and they don't know that they don't know anything about Jasprit Bumrah. Show them Jasprit Bumrah and they're going to be like, this guy's doing things. I don't know what he's doing. Virat Kohli is a naturally cool guy. Hardik Pandya is a rock star. It's like what you really want is to grow it. So, and India should be propping up these other countries. India should be propping up South Africa so that South Africa keeps sending over people like AB de Villiers because BCCI will make more money from it. Like realistically, that's the difference between someone really running something and someone having the most power. And there are drawbacks to this. I mean, I would say ice hockey is in a worse state internationally because of the way that it is run. I would say that the NBA being the league and Europe not having a great league itself has probably just held back basketball at times in other places. It's not like it's all, and baseball should be a far bigger sport worldwide than it is, right? And the NFL would probably be the first proper international European. You'll have a team in somewhere in Europe and a team probably in the UK as well. And eventually you'll probably have a basketball team perhaps in Asia as well and those sorts of things. But essentially that is, put it this way, the NBA and the NFL are sitting around going, how do we make more money off India? Is this a way of doing it? And cricket is sitting around going, no, we're good here. We only need these 3 teams. We're okay. Madness.
Right. And before we finish the episode and all of that, I want to come back to the current season, right? And now Denver Nuggets, let's come back to Denver Nuggets. They were not relevant since 2009, and now they suddenly have 2 big stars, Jamal Murray and Jokic. And they made a run to the conference finals. What do you hope and expect from the Denver Nuggets this season? Do you think they can go one better and reach the NBA finals, probably even win it? Because they have 2 outstanding stars, and where did they even come from?
I'll throw in a small piece before you get to that. Would you start somewhere in there? It would be great if you could tell us who do you want to see start at the 3? Would it be Michael Porter Jr. with the defensive frailties, which let's hope he can improve, or is it going to be Will Barton, who quite frankly was their 3rd superstar before the bubble?
I mean, Denver would have to get past Lakers, and the Lakers have got better this year, and Denver have not.
Right.
I look at the way that Denver is working from a GM sort of perspective, because obviously I was at GM in the Caribbean Premier League, and I've worked as a consultant for T20 teams, and what they are doing is genius in that they are basically going, if they think a player is incredibly talented, they are picking them and stashing them, knowing that they are still going to win 55 games because of the players that they have, basically because of their 2 stars, right?
Right.
And so if you look at what in 2 years' time, their starting lineup could be Joker, Bol, MPJ, Hampton, and Jamal Murray.
Right.
And I'm not sure if that lineup can defend, but it might be able to score 155 points a game. I mean, it's a ridiculous lineup when it comes to it. And if Bol can work out how to defend and MPJ can work out how to defend, then good luck scoring against 3 7-footers, 2 of which you can whiz around the court.
Yep.
So I can see what they're doing from that perspective, they're brilliant at basically finding talent and bringing talent on. And if you look at, they're sort of the kings of the two-way guys, aren't they? Like you have all these players now who are desperate to get a two-way deal with Denver rather than get drafted by a better team, just because it's just like, if you get a two-way deal with Denver, you're going to get a contract in the league and you're going to go somewhere. And better off to be a second rounder at Denver than you are to be a first rounder at another team who don't know how to develop talent. If that's the case, there's no reason why they can't be good for the next 5 to 10 years until Jokic's knees go and perhaps Jamal loses some of his pop or something. But I can't see how this year they get any better fundamentally unless Facundo is so amazing that they can trade Monte Morris to another team. They need someone who could defend Kawhi, PG, Luka, LeBron. You can't defend all those people. And at the moment, I don't even know who on that lineup would be able to defend them. I mean, Jeremy left, and Torrey Craig was given the ass, and that's the guy. They were the two guys that were doing those jobs. So my guess is that they have turned Monte Morris into such a good prospect that he would probably start at another team.
Right.
And they've given him a really good contract as well, upgraded his contract so that everyone is now aware of Monte Morris. So they bring Facundo in, and Facundo just becomes Monte Morris. And then somewhere around the trade deadline, they trade Monte Morris for a 3-and-D guy from another team who's struggling. If that's the case, you've still got to stop them. If they play offense the way they should be a better offensive team than Dallas, realistically, because of the weapons that they have. And Dallas are incredible, obviously, but they should be even better than Dallas if they play full offense. The problem is that Paul Millsap and Gary Harris are their two best defenders. And I'm not sure either of them can really score that much anymore unless you just leave Millsap in a corner. So to answer your question, if I was running this team, I would probably have, obviously the 1 and the 5 are completely, the Joker and Jamal are going to get those two. But I would play Barton at 2 because I think he is a 2 anyway. That immediately gives you a little bit more defense on the court. You then have Harris to come on as a super sub, and you can trade Harris again. If Harris's shot doesn't come back, he has to be traded. And so you can, if some team is trying to dump something around the trade deadline, you then play MPJ at the 3, and he gives you plenty of rebounds, and you probably give JaMychal a go at the 4.
Yeah, that's what
I think. Right. And then JaMychal probably plays backup 5. Bol plays backup 4, if you can, and then you bring, and if those guys aren't good enough, then you go back to Millsap. But I'm not sure they're going to beat the Lakers or the Clippers in a playoff without a 3-and-D guy. So my guess is that a combination of Millsap, Monte Morris, and Gary Harris in some sort of big trade, because they're so deep. The team is ridiculously deep. I mean, they're talking about PJ Dozier, who I thought did really well in the playoffs, not being in their 10-man rotation. You're talking about having potentially Jamal, Facundo, and Monte Morris as your point guards, and you've still got Will Barton and Jokic. There's literally an incredible amount. They could literally pass the ball around every NBA team until every NBA team gets dizzy. But they can't play defense, and they specifically can't defend wings. So if they can upgrade that before the trade deadline, which is my guess, and the absolute best case scenario is they probably don't need Gary Harris anymore unless he suddenly starts shooting at 40%. Literally, you trade Gary Harris for someone who is bigger than Gary Harris, who can shoot better than Gary Harris, and you let someone else dump a bunch of income on Gary Harris. And you give him Monte Morris, for instance, at that point. Then we're into something a little bit more interesting. But they're a really, really dynamic team to watch. I don't know how much you guys have seen them, but they are a really fun and weird team to watch. And the Joker is the craziest basketballer I've ever seen. The ability to, I mean, Luka is obviously on another level. Joker's doing almost the same thing, a foot taller and about 2 seconds slower. What a ridiculous brain he must have in him. They're a really, really fun team to watch. And one of the reasons I didn't warm to that team, 2009 era team, is it was ISO ball. And ISO ball turned me off the NBA so much. Mm-hmm. I do not give a shit at how well you can dribble on your own for 20 seconds and then pull one move off. I want to see the Spurs or the Warriors winging that ball around. I want to see some madness. And Denver have the ability to do that. And they're a great team to watch. And as I said, that starting lineup that they can have in 2 years' time, I mean, that could be fun.
Yeah, I agree with especially with the wing defense problem that they have. That's really the biggest problem, because this team their attack was what, number 5 last season, and the defense was number 16 in the league on efficiency, right? And the biggest hole they've got to plug is the wing defense, because the kind of wings that they're going to go up against in the playoffs, forget the regular season, this team's going to be there somewhere in the top 4, right? But in the playoffs, their wings don't have the size to really take on some of the best wings in the West, and their number 4s, if you want to switch them, don't have the agility. Millsap's not quick enough. Jermichael Green's not quick enough. So that really, if they plug that, boys, this is a tough team to beat in the playoffs. It's kind of like that Miami Heat situation where whatever they do in the regular season, this team is a nightmare matchup in the playoffs, even to teams that finished above them in the regular season. If they can plug that one hole, most of the teams that are better than them right now rely quite a bit on superstar wings that are going to take them for a ride.
Yeah. And look, to be fair, they are so good offensively that they will be able to cover some of that. But they are going to get cornered in the playoffs. And my guess is the minute Monte Morris wasn't, they didn't get rid of Monte Morris this season, especially when they got Facundo. I was just like, well, that's the trade chip.
That's a trade piece, yeah.
You say to a team who needs to get off some income, we'll give you Gary Harris and Monte Morris, right? Mm-hmm. Monte will be able to play with all your new rookies, and he'll be able to give them all the best habits. He'll be able to run the offense, get the ball to the right people. Good, solid defense. He's not a great defender. He'll be able to shoot a little bit as well. And you've got Gary Harris, who, if he comes good, he's still an elite defender, Gary Harris, and and he's still young. Yeah. And then Denver get exactly what they need, which is that one guy who can come in and do that. And at the moment, they're literally hoping that somehow between Bol and MPJ or RJ Hampton, the one of them is going to work out defense by the time the playoffs come around. I mean, athletically, they should all be brilliant defenders. But let's be honest, they are not ready to defend at the NBA level.
Yep, that's the chip master plan. Go ahead, Monish.
True. It's funny that you mentioned how they'll work out to defend LeBron and Kawhi, and you also put PG in that same conversation. I don't think you need to defend Paul George anymore after seeing his performance.
Did you see his contract? I think now you've got to just convince yourself you need to.
But don't forget, the thing about PG is, and that was the tricky thing when Denver played them, and Denver had a fundamentally, I think, a better team setup. But when you're playing against him, he's getting the second best wing defender. I mean, his numbers are still incredible. They crunched him in the playoffs, and I think they played him very, very well. But realistically, Denver, how do you defend PG when you can't defend Kawhi to begin with? Like, how do you go through that? And that's the kind of weird thing. And they're hawking talent. So as someone who ran St. Lucia, my plan was, and sadly I had a falling out with the owner and it was never going to last. But what my plan was essentially was as simple as this: that we know there is a bunch of good young West Indian talent out there. Let us just forget about the overseas players. We'll bring in role players for the overseas players. Let us sign up all these guys to 2, 3, 4 year contracts as long as we can get them on. We get 5 of them. We had Kyron Pollard. We had Rakeem Cornwall. If we could have added Rovman Powell, Obed McCoy to that, suddenly you're in a situation where you've got 2 senior players who are good enough to carry you in a few games. Your overseas players should give you a couple of wins. If one of your flyers comes off, you've now got a local player who's about to be $1 million player in the IPL. That's the sort of thing that Denver does, because you can't get people to Denver. You can't get, the problem with St. Lucia is Barbados is a more attractive island if you've got your wife and kids and you're an overseas player. And most of the best players come from Trinidad or Guyana, right? So it's hard to bring them across. A young player who's not ready yet, you can do that sort of stuff. So I see a lot of intelligence in the way that Denver are putting this together. If you've already had MPJ show that he could probably score 20 points a night in the NBA. If one of Bol or Hampton come off, you are talking about a Fab Four starting lineup, right? And if both of them come across, it's next level. It's a brilliant strategy to do. And if you're in a level where you have those cornerstones, which, as long as the Joker is there, they can't win less than 45 games. It's physically impossible because no teams can stop him, right? They're going to be in the playoffs every year. And, you put one or two good players with him and things happen. You have the flexibility to be really interesting. And you're not going to get big freelancers because you can't even get a free agent to know where Denver is on a map, let alone want to come and play with you.
Right.
It's a really, really interesting setup that they're going through.
Absolutely. I think we've run a little bit over time, but
That's
this
okay.
was
We'll do it
super
in
fun.
2
I mean, I
episodes,
didn't even realize how an hour passed by, more than an hour passed by. It was super fun discussing all of the sports problems that BCCI has and how they can learn from the NBA and the importance of analysis and also analyzing Denver Nuggets a bit. We had real great fun hosting you. We'd love for you to come back actually whenever you have the time. But thank you so much for taking out your time on this. I had a great time.
Yeah, this was awesome, Jarrod.
I think this is my first basketball podcast. I've done quite a few baseball ones and a hockey one, but I don't think I've ever been on a basketball one. So very happy to come on. And if Denver are looking good around the playoffs and you want me to come back and tell you about how they managed to get Bradley Beal over and they're now the favorites for the championship, I will more than happily come on and tell you all about it.
We should do that regardless. Sounds good.
Yeah.
All right. Cheers, guys. Have a good one.
Thank you so much, Jarrod. Bye.
Have a nice one. Take
Bye.
care.